Before we start analyzing the architecture of the Landesmuseum in Klagenfurt, we should maybe recall a few facts from Gustav's life, for they will be relevant to the forms he applied on this building. One could even say that this creation carries the most of his personal touches, his personal notes. It somehow reflects his connections, his experience, his travels. So let's take into consideration three factors. First of all, let's concentrate on his travels, the places he has seen and how they impact him. Let's concentrate on his professional contacts, his cooperations with other architects. And in the first place, let's take a closer look at his closest surrounding, for he also took a lot of inspiration from the already existing architecture. We should keep in mind that Gustav was traveling from already a very young age. He very often undertook short day trips in the surroundings of Vienna, then later also a bit further. But also in quite a young age, he already visited Prague, where his older brother was a bank clerk. And he was very, very impressed by the city, by the architecture, by the nice surroundings. Furthermore, in the middle of the 60s, he traveled to Dresden. Dresden was back then also a very developed city when it comes to the terms of architecture. So these two big cities, they definitely impacted Gustav very much. He also knew very well an area of northern Italy. He was traveling there very often. So northern Italy and parts of Switzerland, where at the end actually he also found his wife. His wife was originating from Switzerland. So much for the personal digressions. So these areas, these places will be to keep in mind when we then refer to the inspirations that he could have brought into his architecture. He has never been to France, although he had a very high esteem for French language and the French architecture. He also was learning French, actually mostly by himself. French was still some kind of lingua franca back then. So whenever you wanted to make an international career, it was vital to speak French, and he also mastered the language. Also on the field of arts and crafts, till the middle of 19th century, France was being regarded as a country which would give the tone to the whole Europe. So from this, those were the motivation for Gustav to learn French as well. And as mentioned, he respected it very much. So this is to place him in the geographical modus. So let's sum it up very quickly. Prague, North Italy, Dresden in Germany, of course the whole main building sites of Vienna from that time. We are speaking here about Ringstrasse and all the huge realizations like the Viennese Opera House, like the Viennese museums, Natural History Museum and the Art History Museum, the university, the building of the Academy of Fine Arts was also at his lifetime under construction, and he was more or less present on all these building sites, or he was also acquainted with the architects who were working there, who were active there. What about his cooperations with other? So we mentioned before that he learned at the atelier of Eduard van den Nul and August von Sickartsburg. Those were actually star architects, one can say. He also collaborated very closely with Karl von Hasenauer, another very well-known architect from the time. And they started their cooperation in the year 1873 on the occasion of the Vienna World Exhibition. It was a huge fair, and the goal of this fair was to present to the whole world how well Austrian artists, Austrian workers, or Austrian art workers are. And there were plenty of small pavilions designed for this exhibition. And Gustav's task was to design an imperial pavilion, a pavilion which was representing a monarch, imperial family reigning the whole monarchy. So de facto, this was the most important pavilion. And this is when he came to cooperate with Karl von Hasenauer. Hasenauer was also a pupil of Sickardsburg and van der Nul, so they all belonged to the same circle. They had all the same teachers. So let's keep in mind Karl von Hasenauer, and let's also keep in mind the two other important architects. They were not only architects, they were also designers. They were designing furnitures, similar like Gustav. And those names are Josef Stork, this is his colleague with whom they finished building the Viennese Opera House. And another one, which was also participating at the construction of the Opera House, was a Czech-based architect, Josef Hlavka. And through Hlavka and through his older brother Anselm, who was a bank clerk in Prague, Gugitz came into contact with a community of Bohemian, of Czech architects. Slightly older than Gugitz was a Prague-based architect Wojtek Ullmann. He also was learning at the atelier of van der Nul and Sickardsburg, and in the 60s of the 19th century he opened his own atelier in Prague. And one can find a lot of similarities between the works of those two, of Gustav Gugitz and Wojtek Ullmann, although we are not sure if they ever met in person. And if those similarities are simply an outcome of having the same teachers and taking inspirations from the same sources, or maybe indeed they knew each other. It is, though, very possible that they did, because another Czech architect, which was Gustav's best friend, was originating from the same city as Ullmann, so it was a small world. So to sum it up, the important surnames will be Karl von Hasenauer, with whom Gugitz was working on the Vienna World Exhibition. Then there would be Josef Hlavka, his connection to the Prague architects. And among these Prague architects, Wojtek Ullmann. And then there will be, of course, a whole row of other important Ringstraßen architects, so those who were building the important realization in Vienna. And among them was, for example, Theophil Hansen, who was an author of the project of the building of the Academy of Fine Arts, also a place where Gustav was receiving his education as an architect. There will be a need to mention one more person, and we are not talking here about an architect, but about a painter. And this professional connection Gugitz had turned out also to be one of his personal connections. And we are talking here about a painter. His name was Pietro Isella. Pietro Isella was born in Switzerland, in the Italian-speaking canton Ticino, Tessin. And he soon came to Vienna and was also active on all the big realization. He was painting the interiors. He had a very big workshop with a lot of collaboratives. And in the beginning of 70s, Gustav Gugitz married his daughter. So Pietro Isella would then often work together with Gustav, and he would often carry out the paintings in the interiors of the buildings designed by Gustav. So much for the personal network, of which will be relevant in the context of the Klagenfurt Landesmuseum, of the Province Museum of Carinthia. And at the end, we should maybe put some focus on the closest surrounding of Gustav, and actually on the local architecture in Klagenfurt itself. There are still a lot of buildings dating to the Biedermeier era in Klagenfurt, and actually before Gustav's time, most of the architects active in Klagenfurt were of the Italian origins. This tradition goes back to the 16th century. After the city was rebuilt after a big fire in the 16th century, there was simply a lot of place. There was a lot of work for the Italian artists, Italian architects, and there used to be even the whole families, the whole generations of Italian architects. So de facto, Gustav belongs to one of the first generation of German-speaking areas. There are very few German-speaking architects mentioned in the sources before him. So he was one of the pioneers if it comes to the locally born architects not originating from Italy. And he also used this existing architecture of his surrounding. He used certain motifs. He took them out from there, and then maybe a bit modify. He would a bit modify them, or maybe not at all, and then apply them onto the buildings that he would realize it by himself. And he did it in a very well orchestrated way. And this procedure, this way of using already existing patterns or already existing motifs, this philosophy might have also something to do with the Prague surrounding, because back then in Prague there was a very strong movement among the historic architecture, which was trying to look for something which was like very typical for the area, for the surrounding. It had also quite a connection with the national movement. Bohemia was struggling to get as much independence as possible within the Habsburgian monarchy, and it was supposed to be brought to the outcomes also in the terms of architecture and art. Yeah, so with this not that broad background, we can finally maybe take a closer look at the building of the Carinthian Landesmuseum, so the Carinthian State Museum, the Museum of the Province of Carinthia, which alternative name is Rudolfinum. Thanks to, and the name Rudolfinum comes self-explanatory from the main patron. The main patron was Crown Prince Rudolf, and he would also open the ready-made museum in the year 1884.